It started as all good trips do, innocent, full of excitement. We had planned this camping trip for months. Just the four of us, me, my best friend Caleb, his girlfriend Jess, and her cousin Mark. A weekend off the grid, away from the noise of the city. The plan was simple: hike deep in the Black Hollow forest, set up camp, drink too much, and tell ghost stories by the fire. The first sign of trouble came as we crossed the old rope bridge into the forest. Halfway across, Caleb stopped, staring at something in the distance. "Did you see that?" he asked, his voice uneasy. "See what?" I followed his gaze, but all I saw was dense forest and shifting shadows. Jess rolled her eyes. "Come on, you two. Let's go before this thing collapses." Caleb hesitated before moving forward, but I could tell something was bothering him. We reached the campsite before dark. It was perfect, secluded, surrounded by towering trees with just enough clearing to see the stars. We set up our tents, built a fire, and let the warmth of alcohol settle into our bones. Laughter echoed through the trees as we traded stories, but as the night stretched on, the feeling of being watched settled over me like a thick fog. I chalked it up to the darkness, to the way the fire played tricks on the trees. Then came the whispers. At first, I thought I imagined them, soft, almost like the wind, but distinct. Words I couldn't quite make out. "Did you hear that?" Mark asked, his voice low. Caleb nodded. "Yeah," Jess scoffed. "It's probably the wind, but the wind doesn't whisper your name." The fire burned low, casting long shadows across the campsite. The air felt wrong, thick, heavy, electric, like the sky before a storm. Then, from the darkness, something moved. It was quick, darting between the trees, just at the edge of the firelight. My breath caught in my throat. What the hell was that? Mark grabbed a flashlight, sweeping it toward the trees. The beam flickered, and for a split second I saw something standing there. A person. No, not a person. Something pretending to be one. Its body was wrong. Too long, too thin, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Hollow, black eyes stared at us, empty and endless. The moment the light hit it, it vanished, as if the shadows swallowed it whole. No one moved. No one breathed. Then the whispers started again, closer this time. "Pack up," I said, standing. "We're leaving." "We can't hike back in the dark," Jess argued. But I could see it in their faces. They knew we had to go. Then the screaming started. It came from the trees, from everywhere. Agonized, human, but not quite. Mark turned, flashlight shaking in his grip. "Run!" We ran. Branches tore at our skin. Roots reached up like hands trying to pull us down. The thing chased us, always just beyond the light, always just behind us. I could hear Caleb breathing hard beside me, could hear Jess sobbing. Then, a thud, a scream. I turned just in time to see Mark disappear into the darkness, his flashlight spinning uselessly on the ground. "Mark!" Jess shrieked. But he was gone. We kept running. We had no choice. Somehow, we made it back to the bridge. Caleb was the first to cross, then Jess. As I reached the middle, I felt it, cold fingers brushing against my ankle. A whisper so close it might have been inside my head stayed I didn't. I ran until my lungs burned, until the forest was behind me, until I collapsed on the ground shaking. The search teams never found Mark. They never found anything. But sometimes late at night, when the wind howls just right, I swear I can still hear his voice, whispering from the trees. The nightmares started immediately. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the thing's face, too long, too empty. I heard the whispers, felt the cold fingers brushing against my skin. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. A week after the incident, I got a call from Caleb. His voice was barely a whisper. "It's not over." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "It's here." Then the call cut out. I drove to his apartment, heart pounding, but by the time I got there, the door was wide open. Inside, the place was trashed, furniture overturned, claw marks raked across the walls. The worst part? The whispers were there, echoing in the empty space. Jess was the next to disappear. One moment she was in her dorm, the next gone. No signs of forced entry. Just a trail of dirt leading from her window to the woods outside. That left me done. I tried to run. Booked a motel 3 towns over. But the whispers found me. The thing found me. Last night, I saw it standing at the foot of my bed, its head tilted at that unnatural angle. Watching, waiting. I don't think I'll make it through tonight. If someone finds us, please, don't go in the Black Hollow Forest. And if you hear your name whispered in the wind, run. I haven't slept in days. Every time I close my eyes, I hear them, more voices now, whispering in a chorus. They know I'm trying to run. They know I'm trying to fight. I see them everywhere. In the reflections of my windows, in the dark corners of my motel room. They aren't just watching any more, Dot, they're coming closer. I barricaded the door. It doesn't matter. The whispers are inside now, Dot, there's no escape. I see that now. Maybe if I stop running, it'll be quick. Maybe if I listen, really listen, I'll understand what they want. Maybe I won't be afraid anymore. If you're reading this, it's too late for me. Burn this journal. Forget my name, and whatever you do, never answer when they whisper yours. They found my motel room empty this morning. The door was locked from the inside. The windows untouched. But I was gone. Only the journal remained open on the nightstand. A single page scrawled in my own handwriting, though I don't remember writing it. Come home. The whispers never stop. And now neither do I. I should have never answered the radio. I know that now. But when you're deep in the woods, miles away from civilization, and a voice crackles through the static at 2 a.m., whispering your name, what would you do? Let me start from the beginning. It was supposed to be a peaceful weekend. Just me, my best friend Liam, and his younger sister Ava. We planned this camping trip for months. One last adventure before Ava left for college. We drove out to Black Hollow Forest, a place known for its quiet beauty, thick with towering pines and long-forgotten hiking trails. Isolated. Perfect. The first night was normal. We set up camp, roasted marshmallows, shared ghost stories, the usual. The only weird thing? We found an old ranger station not far from our campsite. It was abandoned, its windows broken, its walls covered in cryptic symbols and deep claw marks. Bears, Liam had said, shrugging it off. But something about that place unsettled me. By the second night, things got strange. At around 1:45 a.m., a faint sound pulled me from sleep. Static. A low, crackling hum growing louder by the second. I sat up in my sleeping bag, heart pounding. It was coming from a small, battery-powered radio we brought. I was sure we'd turned it off before bed. Then, a voice. At first, it was barely more than a whisper, tangled in static. Then clearer. Ethan. Ethan, can you hear me? My blood ran cold. My name. I grabbed the radio, glancing at Liam and Ava. Both were fast asleep. I pressed the talk button. Who is this? Silence. Then a low chuckle, almost playful. You should leave, the voice said. It's not safe here. The static swallowed the words whole. My hands trembled as I turned the radio off. Maybe I was dreaming. Maybe I was just hearing things, but I barely slept after that. The next morning, I told Liam and Ava. Ava brushed it off, laughing, but Liam frowned. Are you sure you weren't just half asleep? We spent the day hiking. Everything felt normal in the daylight. The eerie events of the night before seemed distant, almost forgettable, until we stumbled across a clearing. Deep in the woods, far from our campsite, we found something wrong. A circle of stones, large and deliberately placed. In the center, a pile of bones, small ones, like they belonged to rabbits or birds. Some were charred, others disturbingly fresh. Ava shivered. Maybe it's a hunter's spot? Hunters don't do this, I said, kicking one of the stones aside. The feeling of being watched prickled the back of my neck. We left quickly. That night the radio came on again. I bolted upright the moment the static returned. This time, I didn't answer. I just listened, heart pounding. Ava whimpered in her sleep, then the voice. But it was different this time. Not a whisper, a low, distorted growl. So, hungry, I shook Liam awake. "Do you hear that?" He did. We both stared at the radio, horrified. The voice grew louder, more urgent. "Ethan, I can see you." The hair on my arm stood on end. Liam lunged for the radio, ripping the batteries out. The voice stopped. But outside, the forest was deathly silent. No wind, no crickets, nothing. Then footsteps, heavy, slow, circling our tent. Ava woke up, her breath hitching. "What the hell is that?" I held a finger to my lips. We listened, paralyzed. The footsteps stopped inches from the tent. Then a long, deep inhale, like something was sniffing the air. Then a chuckle, the same one from the radio. Liam unzipped the tent in one swift motion, shining his flashlight into the trees. Nothing. Just a darkness, swallowing everything beyond the beam. But we weren't alone. I could feel it. And when I looked at Ava, her face was drained of color. We ran, abandoning our tent, our gear, everything. We didn't stop until we reached the truck. Liam fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking. The engine roared to life, and we peeled out of there, dirt and leaves kicking up behind us. The next morning, curiosity got the best of me. I called the local ranger station, asking if anyone else had reported strange activity in Black Hollow. The ranger hesitated. Then he asked me something that still haunts me. "Did you see it?" I swallowed. "See what?" A pause. "Then you were lucky." I never went back. But sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet and still, I swear I can still hear the radio crackle. A month later, Ava called me in the middle of the night. Her voice was shaking. It followed me home. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to tell her she was imagining things, but deep down I knew she wasn't. That night, I turned on my old radio out of morbid curiosity. I hadn't touched it since the trip. For hours, it was just static. Then at exactly 2 a.m., a familiar voice slithered through the airwaves. "Ethan, my blood ran ice cold. You never said goodbye." Over the next few weeks, strange things started happening. I'd wake up to the sound of static, though my radio was unplugged. Shadows flickered in the corners of my vision. Sometimes I swore I heard that same low chuckle right behind me, though I was always alone. Then one night, I found muddy footprints leading from my bedroom window to my bed. I moved out of my apartment the next day. Ava wasn't so lucky. She disappeared 2 months later. Her car was found abandoned on the side of the road, keys still in the ignition. No signs of struggle. No clues. Just gone. Liam refuses to talk about any of it. He deleted his social media, changed his number, and moved states. I don't blame him. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear the radio crackle. They say the woods have memories, that the trees remember every lost soul who ever wandered too deep, every scream swallowed by the darkness. I never believed it until now that I should have never gone on that camping trip. The thought plays on a loop in my mind, a relentless drumbeat of regret. I tell myself that if I had known, if I had even suspected, I would have never set foot in those woods. But the truth is, I did suspect, and I ignored it. It started with a simple plan, 3 days in the wilderness with my best friend, Mark. We've been talking about it for months. Just us, the crisp October air, a roaring fire, and enough beer to drown the silence of the night. It was supposed to be an escape. We set up camp deep in Black Hollow Forest, a place whispered about in town. There were stories, of course. A missing hiker last year, a strange old hermit who roamed the woods, a little girl who disappeared decades ago, her pink backpack found torn to shreds near the riverbank. But stories were just that, stories. We weren't superstitious. We weren't scared. That first night, something felt off. The wind carried a scent of damp earth and something rotten, something old. The fire crackled, but it didn't warm me the way it should have. Mark laughed when I told him I felt weird. "You always get like this in the dark," he said, cracking open another beer. But I knew it wasn't just the dark. It was the feeling of being watched, of something waiting just beyond the reach of our firelight. Then, around midnight, the whispers began. At first, I thought it was the wind. A distant murmuring sound carried through the trees, but it didn't move like the wind. It stayed, circling us, shifting from one side of the camp to the other. "Did you hear that?" I asked. Mark's face darkened. He had heard it too. Probably just the trees settling. But we both knew it wasn't. Trees don't whisper. We tried to ignore it, forcing laughter, changing the subject, but the tension sat heavy between us. Sleep came in restless waves, my dreams tangled with images of something standing just outside the tent, breath fogging against the thin fabric. The next day, we hiked deeper into the forest. The whispers had stopped with the sunrise, but an unease lingered. The trees seemed taller, the paths unfamiliar. It felt wrong, like the forest itself had shifted overnight. Then we found the cabin. It wasn't on the map. A small wooden structure nestled between two gnarled trees, its door slightly ajar. Every instinct screamed at me to stay back. "I don't think we should." But Mark was already stepping inside, and I, like a fool, followed. The air inside was thick with dust and decay. A single chair sat in the center of the room. Chains bolted to the floor. Scratch marks, deep, desperate grooves lined the walls. And then there was the smell. That sickly sweet stench of something long dead. Mark gagged. "Let's get out of here." We turned, and the door slammed shut. For a moment, there was only silence. Then the whispers returned, louder, closer. Something moved in the shadows. A shape, hunched and wrong. A guttural sound, like a chuckle, rattled from the darkness. We ran. We tore out of that cabin like the devil himself was clawing at our heels. I don't remember how long we ran, only that the whispers followed. They twisted into laughter, high-pitched and gleeful. We didn't stop until we reached camp. We were breathless, shaking. Mark grabbed my shoulders. "We need to leave. Now." I nodded, fumbling for my pack. But then we heard it. A voice, high and small, calling from the trees. "Help me, please." A little girl. Mark froze. "That's not real," I whispered. "That's not. Help me. I'm lost." It was coming closer. Mark turned toward the sound. "We have to check." "No." I grabbed his arm. "We don't." A small figure stood just beyond the trees. Pale, barefoot, wrapped in a tattered pink jacket. Her hair hung in matted strands over her face. "Please help me," she whispered. But her mouth didn't move. Mark took a step forward. "No!" I yanked him back, and that's when she screamed. Not a child's cry. Not human. Something raw and jagged and endless. The trees shook with it, the ground trembled beneath us. And suddenly she wasn't a little girl anymore. The thing that stood there was tall, skin stretched too tight over a gaunt frame. Its eyes were hollow, black pits that seemed to pull the light from the world. It reached for us, fingers long and twisted, nails like claws. We ran. I don't remember packing. I don't remember the drive home. I only remember the feeling of something watching as we fled, whispering our names, promising that we would return. Mark and I never spoke about it. We never went back. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still hear the whispers, and I know the forest remembers me too.